more than 400 years before Muhammad and completely lost around that time or earlier and not known to anyone were unearthed. I believe it was in Qumran, could have been the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there was the story. Maryam, the mother of Isa, was in her chamber and food appeared that was out of season, and her guardian came in and said, "Where'd you get that?" And she said, "It's from Allah, He gives whoever He will." Now if you're in a university and you write, you know what, maybe the data here is suggesting a common source. Alright? That Muhammad got this information from the same source that other people got it from, which is the Ilah, which is Allah. If you were to write such a thing, I guarantee you, you will be denied your degree, if not removed from the university entirely. So it's not allowed. It's not allowed in U.S. academia to even entertain the notion. But you as an individual should not be held back by that. You should allow yourself to entertain the notion with all your rationality, all your abilities, all your intellect, and decide for yourself. Don't let others decide for you. Is it possible that this world has a creator? Number one, because, as I said, most of mankind, if you take the whole span of mankind, probably 99.99% believed that. It's only in the last century or two that there were any significant numbers of people saying, "No, I don't believe that." But that's not the point, because that's not Ilah. Okay? The creator, the prime mover, some people called it, I don't know what, the supreme being, that's not the Ilah. Remember Ta'li? Ta'li is you. This is what you do, not what the deity does. We call that Rabb or Khaliq. We have other words for that. The creator, the Lord, the one who brings life and brings death and controls everything, controls what's in the universe. We have other words for that. That's not the Ilah. Those terms refer to what the deity does. Ilah refers to what you do. It refers to your worship and submission and obedience to the deity. The second proposition, of course, and this is the more outrageous if you're coming from the outside and you never understood these things before. Why on earth would this deity, this creator of all things, this one who is in complete control, why would He create two creatures, us and another creature called the jinn, who aren't always subject to His orders? They're subject to His will, yes, because everything is subject to His will. But He tests them. He creates them with a will to choose, and then He sends a roadmap through a messenger and says, "This is righteousness, this is what I want you to do, this is evil, this is what I want you to stay away from," and then waits to see what the result's going to be. Actually, He knows the result ahead of time, but that's a weird proposition. That's a great big proposition if you've never entertained such a thing. So don't get distracted by any other issues, by politics, by cultural issues, by do I like these people, do I not like these people, how do they treat their women. Don't worry about that yet. Stay focused on the two questions. Do I believe that there's a creator? Number one, and I think most people ultimately do or will. And do I believe that this creator actually sent messages to mankind as a test for us? Now that one's probably a little harder. And these messages are all basically in agreement that we'll face the consequences of what we do in this life, and those consequences could be grievous and painful and terrible. And they could be the ultimate opposite of all that. If there's any chance of that, don't you want to know? The book, the final book sent to Muhammad, peace be upon him, by the way, yes, it is a Quran, it is a recitation, but incidentally, it also refers to itself as Kitab, which means book. And the amazing thing about this is that Allah gave us the knowledge that His final message will be preserved in two ways. And it's preserved every single consonant and vowel in it from the day it came from Allah. And it was preserved in two ways. It was preserved as a Quran, which is the majority of it, when it mentions itself, it calls itself Quran. And it was preserved as Kitab, as a written book. And a lot of people get confused about this. They say, well, the Quran didn't have vowels for a couple of decades, not even diacritics, which distinguish some of the letters from each other. How can you say this book is accurate? The written version of the Quran could not stand on its own for several decades after the time of the Prophet because it was not the primary means of preservation. It was preserved orally as a recitation. There were dozens and hundreds and thousands of people who could recite it from end to end and check each other and not make any mistake, and that's how it was preserved. It was written from the beginning, but the written was only notes. It was like, what do you call that stuff? The court reporter. It was like shorthand, because a lot of it was ambiguous. There was 3 letters here you couldn't tell from each other because no one had invented the dots yet. They weren't invented until later. So that it was not relied on as a written book, it was preserved as a recitation. But eventually the book reached a stage of independence when we got the diacritics and we got the vowels. Now, but the recitation never broke, the chain never broke. It has been preserved until today by dedicated chains of narration, of recitation. But the written became independent when it got all the vowels, and now there's no discrepancy between the two. So it was both a book and a recitation. So, all of us need to entertain these questions very seriously, not get distracted in this pursuit, because it's really the only important thing. And when you come to realize that this world indeed has a creator, a Rabb, and he is indeed more than that, he is an Ilah. He is one who not only has will and power and omnipotence, but also has order and command and things that he dislikes and things that he likes from us, and requirements of us, what he wants us to do and be in this world. That's the Ilah. And if you get to that level of understanding, then what about these messages? And especially the final message, which is preserved intact. You can read it as it came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and look for guidance in it. If you find this to be true, you cannot call yourself a rational being if you don't run to it and try to see, okay, what does it expect from me? And then the other issues that have been bothering you will become clear and easy to resolve. Okay, I'm going to turn the mic back over to our star attraction here. And please be saving up your questions for the question and answer period after the afternoon prayer, which we'll make after this next segment.